Starting
The
broadcast.
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen.
About the paperless office. We've been talking about the paperless office for decades. It used to be that microfilm was considered the paperless alternative and everything was going to be online real time. Yeah, well, we see how that happened. And I know a lot of my clients still have microforms in place. But when you look at the overall amount of information that we have in our organizations, you can assume that between 70 and 80% of the documents we have are in paper format. And that obviously is changing every year because we're going much more electronic. So another 19 to 29% is just that. It's an electronic format with some microforms still around. Believe it or not, I have a lot of clients with microfilm, and when you think about it, when the great electromagnetic pulse comes down from the sky and destroys our computers, you can still take microfilm and a magnifying glass and hold it up to the sun and read those documents. Do I recommend it? No, not even close. But it is human nature for us to want paper in front of us. It's easy to sort through. It's easy to move things around. If we don't have the luxury of multiple screens on our desk, it's much easier to deal with in electronic documents and find this information. The advent of computers has increased the quantity of paper that we have by 400%. Think about it. The first thing you did after you bought a computer, the next thing you purchased was a printer. Well, I don't recommend that anymore. I recommend getting a scanner instead because we're looking towards that less paper office. Look what happened during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Lockdown happened. All of a sudden, we couldn't go into the office when, like I say, 70 to 80% of our information is in paper format. We were even lucky if we had access to the electronic documents that were in our organization. So it really was a wake-up call for a lot of cities and districts and counties to say, whoa, we need to get this in place to continue to serve our public in the case of a disaster. Now, as records managers, what we promote is the less paper office. Through an organizational-wide records and information management program, through good records management practices, and generally accepted record-keeping principles, we can do that. Because as far as I see it, as you saw on the last slide, there were some rolls of toilet paper. We're about as close to the paperless office as we are to the paperless bathroom. We're getting there, but I know that it's not going to disappear in my lifetime. So what is records and information management? It's the systematic control of recorded information regardless of media. And I have to say that because too often when people talk with me about their records management programs, they're thinking, oh, well, it's all the paper. That's just the paper. The electronic stuff, well, we have that somewhere else, and that's okay. Now, this is everything regarding information throughout your organization, through its active use, management, storage, and ultimately disposition, whatever that may be. So why do we need it? First thing, Federal Freedom of Information Act. It requires us to keep paper documents, or no, I'm sorry, not paper documents, to keep documents and provide those upon request as long as they don't have confidentiality behind them. Same thing with the California Public Records Act, requiring us to provide documents upon request to people as long as it's materials that are considered an official record, and I'll touch on that in a bit too. It's a Secretary of State mandate. Government Code 12236 and several others require that we provide this information. And that's what clerks do. District clerks, city clerks, county clerks. We follow generally accepted record-keeping principles, like I said in one of the first slides. So, what is a record? Seems obvious. Well, kind of is. It's any writing or recording containing information related to the conduct of business, prepared, owned, used, stored, managed, like I said earlier, regardless of physical form. So if you look at some of these examples, we're talking about paper, binders, microfilm again, social media. Big thing in my industry now, social media and the ability to to maintain the posts that we put on social media. Texts, another big case too. City of San Jose versus Mr. Smith. You have to provide texts that relate to your business activities if it's requested. Electronic documents, obviously, audio and video tapes of board meetings, old school stuff like compact discs and DVDs. I know that I don't have a DVD player or compact disc player on my computer anymore. I have some external machine sitting off to the side somewhere. I have to find it. But again, it's old school technology, but it's still considered a record. And email, for the most part, email can be considered a record. That's something we'd have to get into on a different discussion. So when we talk about records that we have to produce as part of a public records request and the documents that we consider the original document of record, we are talking about the official records. Okay, that is the original document of reference, meaning that if someone were to request this specific document, this is the final version, and this is what we can provide. It's not a draft. It's nothing that led up to that final version. It's just what they're requesting, this original document. It could be an electronically generated document, specifically in a format that does not allow modifications. So it could be something that's created on a trusted system. For instance, if you have a document that's degrading and you need to preserve this in some format, you can run it through a copier, or you can scan it. You can print it to PDF, whatever it takes. Ultimately, those documents would be created on what's called a trusted system, and we'll touch on these a little bit more too. Ultimately, also, those documents, those final official records, if they're in electronic format, should be stored in a trustworthy repository. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. By creating a system or a document using a trusted system, we're basically replacing the original record. I had a client, as a for instance, who had 15 file cabinets worth of deeds to prove that they owned land all throughout the Bay Area. And these were documents that were going back to the 1800s. And they were the old school trifold with a very thin onion skin style paper. And they were falling apart. We literally had to take tweezers and white gloves to pull these documents out of the file cabinets, open them up as gently as we could, and use a top photographic scanner, what they call a platinum scanner, to take a picture of these to preserve these as a trusted copy. Because once we started folding that paper back up again, it fell apart. So we created an original record from a trusted copy out of an original record. So basic program segments of any records management system include active filing systems, physical filing systems. How do we deal with our paper? Inactive records management for both electronic and physical files. A good records retention system. How long do we need to keep these documents by law? How long do we need to keep them by our administrative or operational needs? Electronic records and document management. That's our focus for today. Vital records protection and disaster recovery. If something were to happen to the building that we work in, what do we need tomorrow to be up and running and serving the public? Or what would be so costly to reproduce that it could jeopardize the financial stability of our organization? And then information governance. That's that generally accepted record keeping principles. It's the overall umbrella of records management and how we are implementing our programs. So what systems do you use? Well, there are several that are available. There's electronic records management systems, electronic document management systems, and electronic content management systems. They all basically act in a similar format. The intent is to track creation of information. Whether that's a physical file in a records management system, where you're printing labels and applying them to a folder and sticking them in a shelf and tracking it that way. Electronic documents that are created and stored in a repository, or content that is tracked in some other method coming from other process management systems. It's intended to organize information. What's the way that we can make sure that anyone who has access to the system and is allowed access to the documents can find that information? Improving distribution. Easier for us to now send agenda packets out to multiple people electronically, as opposed to in paper format like we used to do back in the day. We want to reduce paperwork. That's the point. Less paper offices. And streamline workflow too. The ability to create an agenda packet for that matter. Having a system that allows us to route documents and get them approved to compile into this final document called the agenda packet. And ultimately to provide security, to limit the number of people that can do specific things in documents. But what do we need to do this? Well, trustworthy electronic document or record preservation systems. This is the fun part. We have several citations that require us and give us guidelines on how to deal with trustworthy electronic document preservation. The core one for districts is Government Code 60203. I'll touch on each one of these in a little bit in the next slides too. We have other government codes, 12168.7, and the big one is California Code of Regulations 22620. I know, it's a bunch of citations. It's great bedtime reading, but we need it. So the core one that focuses on districts is Government Code 60203. It's basically saying that if we are going to destroy records after we've converted them to an electronic or other format, we have to follow these guidelines. We have to make sure that the content cannot be modified or deleted for that matter after it's been preserved as the final record. Again, we're talking about a trusted copy of a document. It focuses on quality control too. Is the information, can you verify that the information that you have converted is legible? Access and preservation of documents too. How do you, what kind of security mechanisms do you have in place to stop people from accessing information that they shouldn't be accessing? And again, designating that converted electronic version of the document as the original record. Now, there are some records that I will still recommend that be maintained in paper format. That would include resolutions, ordinances, if you do ordinances, minutes, and recorded documents, mainly because they have, they often will have some kind of signifier to prove that it's an official record if it was created in paper format, such as embossments, or that little sticker that sits at the top from the county recorder saying this is an official record. So because of those, they're not easy to reproduce on a scanner or an electronic format. So I tend to recommend that those be kept in paper format in addition to the electronic version, which will be your reference copy. And then there's 12168.7. This is another great reading. There's a lot of duplication between these citations that I'm telling you about, but again, these are the ones that designate how we deal with electronic documents. In particular, 12168.7 focuses on the International Organization for Standardization, that's ISO, and the American National Standards Organization, ANSI, for the methodology that you use to create documents. It also requires you to go and look at those citations too, and those standards to get a better gauge. I don't have those up here, and that's okay. It's giving us a layout right here in 12.168.7. I know you probably can't read this very well, but that's okay. The big one is California Code of Regulations 22620 and the subsequent sections of it. This is the Trustworthy Electronic Document or Record Preservation Guideline. It was created with a combination of AIM, which is the Association of Information and Image Management, ANSI and ISO standards, and compiled into AIM's guidelines, ARP1-2009, obviously created in 2009. They worked with the state to create the trustworthy preservation requirements for all agencies throughout the state. That's not only state level, it's also local districts and municipalities and counties too. So if you have a system, are you in compliance? Honestly, I have very, very few clients that are actually in full compliance with these guidelines. We're there, but it's a bit of a process. And the other crazy thing is, does this apply to you? One of the sections of the citation states that the uniform guidelines or standards in these regulations apply to agencies, et cetera, according to that 12.168.7. The standards, this is the crazy part, the standards apply to local agencies only to the extent that existing law requires a local agency to apply the standards. Because that's clear. Basically what it's saying is that under 12.168.7, there are designations for those who should be applying these guidelines. So it all comes down to best practices on dealing with electronic documents. So why do we need it? Well, there's a time limit for it, and I'll talk about that a little bit more too. The point is that if the intent of if our intent is to destroy the records after we've scanned or converted them, then we want to make sure that these are in place. If we don't destroy the paper and keep it offsite somewhere, we're in compliance because we can always go back and reference the paper as the official record or the original document. But if we plan on destroying, which a lot of my clients do now, destroying the record after we've converted it to electronic, then we have to be in compliance with this because those official records are now the original. The original official record would be the electronic version of it. So I mentioned the time limit. This is kind of the crazy thing. These guidelines went into place on August 8th of 2012. The requirements state that 6 months after that date, we have to be in compliance. I don't quite understand why they did that. If a system was implemented after August 8th of 2012, it must be in compliance with the guidelines. If you've implemented a program before August 8th of 2012, you have a reasonable amount of time to get into compliance with the guidelines. They say as soon as practicable, meaning that, well, if we don't have any funding for it, it's practicable for us, right? So we can take our time. We're talking now, what, 12 years after this was implemented? And like I said, compliance is limited, to say the least, amongst a lot of the organizations that I work with. So then we have another subsection here called the practice. Now, what this is, it says that we have to have policies and procedures in place for our processes to convert and store electronic document management system or electronic documents in a management system. Again, that's Association of Information and Image Management guideline. Gives you some ideas on how to set up your policies and your procedures. And the state requires that we have these in place and that we update our policies regularly. Now, this could be part of your overall records management policy. It could be a separate policy that it focuses specifically on electronic documents. It's however you want to organize that, that policy and the procedures for it. And then there's the storage section too. These are all the subsections of the guidelines. ISO 15801 will give you guidelines in very, very much detail to store electronic documents. This is something that's more for your IT group to focus on and comply with. One of the things that the guidelines state is that you have to have documents in a specific format. Now, the recommendation is to use what's called PDF-A. And if you don't know what that is a PDF document that is an archival quality version of that document. If you know about PDAs or PDFs, when you create a PDF and you OCR it, optical character recognized, so you can search within the document and stick it in a system, if you were to pull that document out later on, it technically comes out in two different formats. You've got your image, which is the PDF, and then you've got a text file that is how it recognized all the data that's on that PDF document, on that image. That text file is modifiable. You can get in there and you can play around with it and make it difficult to then find that information later on. With the PDF-A, it's combined into one, and it's locked down as of now, because PDFs used to be locked down too, and then it got cracked, and now we can do all sorts of things with the regular PDF. We can highlight, annotate, tag, put labels on it, redact. With the PDF-A, you can't do that. You can even get down to the level of limiting whether or not it can be printed. So that's what the state considers the official record, the document of record. Okay. That also requires that you keep these documents in two separate formats, two separate copies. So your PDF-A would be your archival version of the document, and then you could have another document, whether that's a PDF, a JPEG, a whatever you want as the reference version. But that PDF-A, if it's requested by the courts, is the one that you would provide, not the reference copies that you have on the side. Again, it's duplication, and it's not something that's always easy to deal with when it comes to electronic document management systems. It's very much an IT aspect of your systems and working with them to develop how you store the records. So some other formats include JPEGs, a picture. JBig, these are ones that they list in there. JPEG 2000s, I'm honestly not familiar with that too much. What they don't recommend is non-standard formats or proprietary formats. And one of the issues for those of you who may or may not have Laserfiche, Laserfiche, and by the way, I don't represent any product supplies or equipment. I am working with CPS to teach you about records management systems and electronic document management. But a lot of my clients have Laserfiche as their document management system, as their trustworthy system. The problem is that the TIFF format, which is the native format for Laserfiche, is technically not considered a trustworthy document because essential tags that are associated with that image can be modified. Reality says, by using security mechanisms and limiting who has access to documents, limiting who has deletion or modification aspects to those documents can make this a trusted system. In addition, you can also drag in PDF documents and keep them in there as PDFs too. It's just that the native format within Laserfiche focuses on TIFF. I'm going to hand this off to Jamie now. He is going to talk a little bit about scanning processes too. So Jamie, if you would take this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bruce. Appreciate it. Yeah, so as many of you know, that CPS does provide backfile scanning services. We understand that your office is probably busy enough running the city or district that you're coming from. So we have stepped in and we do provide those services for you guys. If it is anything from banker's boxes full of paper to maps, drawings, fiche, film, whatever it is, we do take care of that for you. We did get into the backfile scanning services industry because our Laserfiche clients were giving us a lot of complaints about other scanning companies not knowing what they were doing, and just causing a little bit of frustration and not having the same quality that CPS provides with their Laserfiche services. So you'll find that we have obviously a great understanding of Laserfiche, and having us as your scanning partner is definitely beneficial for some obvious reasons. One of the questions that a lot of people do ask is, okay, well, if you have all my information or all of our paper, what happens if we need a document? So we do typically take our jobs in batches. There's probably only been 1 or 2 instances where someone's actually said, bring a big truck. So we will take it in batches. If you guys do need a document, we guarantee 24-hour response time that we will go find the document for you. We will index it, and then we will send it to you utilizing a secure download link as well. If for some urgent matters come up, we could typically get it back to you within 2 to 4 hours. Once we have scanned your information, we do the secure ingestion into Laserfiche for you as well, kind of taking the pain out of that side. And then if you wanted us to destroy your paper and securely utilize shredding services, we can do that, but we can also hold on to them for a period of time if you guys would like us to. We have a ton of city references, a lot of special districts that are utilizing our scanning services with piggybackable contracts. So if that's something that you would like to have us take a look at, please get in touch and we would be more than happy to provide a quote, take a look exactly what you guys have, and break it down even just for budgetary reasons so you can just kind of plan for the future. That's my little piece. I'll pass it on back to Bruce.
Great, thank you, Jamie. All right, so how do we get these systems into place? All right, as I said, I don't represent products. I use Laserfiche extensively, and I really like the newest versions of Laserfiche. I also use other systems too. The beauty is that a lot of these systems have come down in price now, mainly because we're going more towards software as a service, SaaS systems. So in order to get a system in place, so what do? Well, you want to analyze what's out there. Okay, if you have an EDMS system or electronic records management system, evaluate it. It may be old. I have several clients that are using old systems and want to migrate to a newer system. So evaluate your current document management practices in your departments. Talk with the departments. If you have records coordinators, which would be a point person in each department within your organization, talk with them. What's working for them? What's not working for them? What do they want to make electronic? What would be essential for the organization or the department alone to have an electronic format? Develop a file plan, some sort of a taxonomy system, a classification system. This tends to be or can be coordinated with your records retention schedules. Because records retention schedules are basically a listing of all the types of records, what we call record series, throughout your organization. And hopefully they're accurate. If they are, and you have a coding system that you're assigning to each one of those entries, use that as your file plan and build the metadata profiles. The information about each document would go in what's called a template. And that template has fields that you would fill in. It might be the date, it might be the document title, a type of document, responsible parties, address, name, whatever it might be. Develop those metadata fields according to the document that's going to be stored and attached to that template and those metadata fields. Big thing is evaluate systems. Look at what's out there. Talk with other organizations. Find out what they're using. What do they like? What don't they like about the systems that they have in place? And budget funds. It used to be that these systems were very, very expensive to implement. Now, like I said, with software as a service, everything is something more as a subscription, and it's also cloud-based too. So you can store your documents off-site on the provider's systems, and also basically access it from wherever you want. Home office, in the office, on vacation. Budget funds for it though. The initial cost of the software can be pretty low at this point. It's the integration that can cost a little bit more because it depends upon the size of your organization, the level that you want to integrate the systems into the departments. Start as a pilot program. Often it tends to be in the clerk's office because clerks are the records managers of the organization. So start in your office and then build it out, then roll it out accordingly and budget as you need for those systems and for the rolling out. Develop your policies and procedures. Very important. Making sure that you designate security. What are the responsibilities throughout the organization? What is your board responsibility? What is your general manager's responsibility? Yours, your records coordinators, staff in general, your legal counsel. Make sure that you've designated in there who is allowed documents, who is allowed to modify or delete records within the document management system. You purchase your system, ready to get it in place. What do? Well, you want to test. Got to test it. Create those profiles or templates with the metadata fields in it and discuss it with the departments and say, does this meet your need? You don't want 30 or 40 different fields that they're required to enter in because no one's going to do it. I promise you. You want to keep it simple and make it so you can find the documents with a reasonable amount of searching and not entering in so much information that you're restricting people from assigning the documents to the management system. Searching. What do you need to find the documents? Can you do full text searches within? Often, most systems will allow, once you import the documents or scan the documents directly into the system, they will automatically do that OCR, the optical character recognition, and allow you to then search within documents or just by the name of the document. When I do scanning projects, I can't fill in all of that template data because of the time that's involved with it. So what I do is create a naming convention for the document after it's been scanned. What information would you need in the name alone to find that document set? Then you have classification routing too. Systems like Laserfish and others have a system that where you assign that template and enter information into those fields. Based upon that, it will route it to a spot within the database, within the repository, along with other documents that are very similar to it. So it's a fantastic feature, and it's worth exploring too. It may take a little bit of time to implement that component, but it's worth it because it simplifies it. Not all of us are records managers. We know that. So we want to allow the layperson the simplicity of migrating documents into our system. Once we've done all of our testing, it looks like everything's working well, then we're ready to go into production where we're actually storing physical or the electronic documents and converting physical documents into the repository. And you're going to run into some issues there too, probably. That's okay. We've done most of the testing. Any issues beyond that should be minor in comparison to what we were dealing with in the testing component. And develop an exit strategy too. What if it doesn't work? What if people aren't using the system? What do we, how can we transfer to a new system if we need to that makes people happy? So look at exit strategies too. That could be a money back guarantee after implementation or a period of use too. Say, hey, we want like a 6 months period where if this isn't working for us, that we can back out. So something to discuss. So what do you need? Well, definitely senior management support. You have to talk with your general managers. You've got to talk with your board and get the approvals. They're receptive now. Again, because of the pandemic shutdown, they're very receptive because they realized how much business time was lost and how much information we couldn't access. And they're willing to give us a little bit towards improving our system. So take advantage of it. Take advantage of it now. Talk with senior management. Implement your pilot program. Like I said, own it. Take it now. Make it you. And then people will see and go, oh, that's pretty neat. I'd like to get that in my department too. Work with your IT team. If you are required to go out for RFP, request for proposal, pull together the specifications with them, what they need to make a successful system, plus what they feel the departments might need to access this information. And they're going to tell you how they need to store it too. One of the other components of those of the state's guidelines is backing up this information on an unmodifiable storage source. Now, it used to be that CDs, when you created a CD and even DVDs, once it was on that disk, you couldn't overwrite it, you couldn't change it, you couldn't do anything with it. Then they came out with the other ones that allowed you to do that, right? Well, now it's all about hard drive systems that they call worm systems. It's write once, read many times, worm. That does just that. Those official final records would be written to that worm drive and they cannot be modified after that. And of course, backed up off-site somewhere. So work with your IT teams, evaluate your potential vendors and software, and discuss that equipment that they need to store the information and the format we're going to store it in. Utilize your current systems, your current indexes. Like I said, retention schedules. It's a great organizational source. Use them. And consider the workflow processes too. If you want to build in workflow for agenda packets, if your engineering team wants to build it in for CIP projects, or whatever it might be, look at what's available and consider those workflow components. It doesn't have to be initially, but they can be added in later on too. And linking up with process management software systems to make creating a document and storing it not only within your repository, but in those process management systems too. And that's your reference copy of it. So once we have our system in place, you got to train people. Train your records coordinators, those point people in your department. Train staff and management. Let them know how the system should work. Most of them will just be searching for documents. Others will be much more detailed. They'll be importing documents, moving things around, modifying documents if they are allowed to do so. Distribute manuals. I create a little how-to guide when I implement records retention schedules. How do we deal with electronic documents as part of retention components? How do you pack a box, for that matter, of paper documents? Sounds simple, but believe me, I've seen worse. A lot of bad stuff. So create a document, a manual of some sort that is easy for people to understand. And then on an annual basis, if not more regularly, talk with your departments and see that they're complying with the guidelines, that they're not just storing it on shared drives and it's like, oh, I'm just going to keep it over here because, well, I know where it is, and that way I have full control over it. One of the big things that you need to talk to individuals about is that the records that they may be creating and managing are technically not their records. They're the organization's records. And you've basically been paid to work on those documents. So hoarding is not allowed. Auditing and assistance with compliance is kind of key, because you'll see where the issues might come up and how to correct those issues later on. Again, what you need: executive support. A records management committee or group may be comprised of all of those records coordinators. A good records management policy in place that goes beyond just electronic documents. It deals with all aspects of information in your organization. Implement your program systematically. This does not happen overnight. As I say down below there, take baby steps, baby, because that's what it takes. I have a client that I've been working with since 1991, and I'll be in again next week on Monday. They have a system in place that they want constant massaging with and making sure that it is running as smoothly as possible. Gather and give information. Use your records coordinators, those point people, and gather information about what they need, and give them information about what we intend on doing with electronic documents. You have some sources for this information too. My organization, my professional organization is ARMA. It's the Association of Records Managers and Administrators. I am a certified records manager and have been so since 1991. And there's a lot of guides, a lot of steps that you need to take in order to get that certification. It's pretty extensive, you know. ARMA has all those sources of information to provide you, to you about records management activities. AIM, Association of Image and Information Management. They created those guidelines with the state. The Secretary of State, they have guidelines for records management, for retention. Now you have to be careful with that because they're very, very, very out of date. But it's a good source of information on records that the state is requiring us to keep. Talk with your fellow clerks. Talk with people in your professional organizations. What are they doing? How did they implement? And talk with professionals like CPS or me. I can talk about records ad nauseum forever. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. What are our results? Well, a path well planned. If you have any questions, I'm not sure, can we take questions?
We can. So I'd like to ask that you type your questions into the question box, which is part of the GoToWebinar panel. It should be toward the bottom, and it literally says questions on it. If you type your questions in there, I will ask them. I have some already, Bruce. So, but I do like the idea of this slide to kind of ping people for, oh, he said this, I should ask about that. So I think that's great. Okay.
Great.
So first question. You had mentioned briefly in the beginning about social media. Can you shed a little light about what that would look like? So, for instance, if a city is using X to tweet about its various activities, you know, do you suggest they screenshot and then, you know, build up a whole retention policy around that and kind of go from there? I know you can't obviously advise on that on a webinar, but what at a high level does that look like?
Well, there are systems that allow you to capture social media. The one that I'm most familiar with is Active Social.
Sure. And
that allows you to preserve social media posts. And yeah, of course, you can just as easily screenshot them too if you want to. It used to be that the state, in the state's retention requirements, it actually has a requirement on changes to your website, which is outdated at this point because so much is done on demand, just like with social media. Now, the newer systems like Active Social can capture those documents and the changes that that you've made to social media sites or posts that you made to social media sites. So again, the other option would be to do just that, to do screenshots. If you can't afford the systems or don't want to buy a system, it requires a little bit of extra time on your side to do that, but nonetheless, it can be preserved as a record, and then you can keep that in your repository. The minimum retention on all those documents is 2 years. And that's required by the state, specifically for cities and counties. For districts, there's no specific guideline that states it, and I can get really into the weeds here. There's no specific guideline that states 2 years, but it's highly recommended because it's all based upon a statute of limitations. So if you want more information about that, contact me directly.
Okay, what are the items that need to be set in place to make Laserfiche a trusted system?
Like I mentioned, security is key. There's a couple ways that you can do this. Understanding that TIFF is the format, and we've talked with Laserfiche about this in the past. I've talked with Laserfiche about this in the past. They really don't have much of an interest in changing their native format. You can import documents as PDFs and stop the system from converting it to a TIFF document. And even if it does, you can keep the PDF-A as a separate document, which in many ways follows those guidelines. Your PDF-A is your final version of the document, your official record, and the TIFF that Laserfiche has converted it to is your reference document. So that's one option. It's clicking a button within Laserfiche to say, nope, we're going to keep that PDF also. The other component would be security mechanisms. Again, seriously limiting the amount of people, the number of people that can modify or delete a document. I always recommend maybe 2-3 people at most, one being the clerk of the organization, the other being IT, and maybe the third person being the general manager. Yes, you might get a lot of requests, especially if people are importing large quantities of documents into the system. You might get requests, oop, made a mistake here, need to remove this one, and so on. That's something you can work out with the departments as they're doing migrations like that. But security is key. And again, remember, you want to have that in your policy too.
You mentioned that certain types of documents you don't recommend throwing away, such as ordinances and resolutions. And the reason is that
Yes.
there could be a seal or what have you. And this is a me question. Many enterprise content management systems have the ability to, as I'm sure you know, to watermark or stamp. Can that not be recreated on the electronic document, or no? Would that be a fuzzy gray area in terms of legalities?
It is kind of a fuzzy gray area there. You know,
Okay.
a physical attachment like a label or an embossment is
Sure.
is much more accepted.
Okay.
But you know, a watermark, depending upon how the security mechanism works with the watermark, yeah, that's doable. Absolutely. Oh, you mentioned something else, and I just lost my train of thought on it too. The watermark. Oh, that's the other thing too. Is so many documents are now being approved through DocuSign.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a DocuSign has that tag at the top that says, you know, there's a checksum basically that proves that this is the official record. That can be accepted as an official copy, no question. because of the security mechanisms behind DocuSign. For those other documents, I do tend to recommend keeping it in paper format. But again, we're going so much more electronic when it comes to signatures. A lot of my clients are just using DocuSign or an electronic signature of some sort to approve the document.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. In the beginning of the presentation, or almost beginning, you talked about different types of projects as you see them differently. So records retention policies versus putting together a disaster recovery plan. How would you approach it from the disaster recovery plan in terms of high level? What would you use? What would you recommend? Just some kind of direction marks, I guess is what they're asking.
Sure. The state requirements do address backing up the documents, specifically the PDFAs. And that's where a cloud-based system, in addition to an on-site or an on-premises storage system, would be tremendously helpful for those documents. Now, when we talk about vital records, everybody thinks their records are vital. I know. Well, they might be vital to you as an individual, but they're probably just important or useful to the organization. We care about documents that prove the history of the organization, prove the decisions, minutes, resolutions, ordinances of the executive bodies, or have some other value to the organization, which can even be for a short period of time. For instance, accounts receivable records. If there's a disaster, we care about money. Accounts payable, well, they'll bill us again. No big deal. But it's a short-term vital record. It's something that once we're paid, money's in the bank. We don't really care about that anymore. That's now it's just a useful record to us. So information requires, for vital purposes, requires an off-site location. Now that could be a hotspot in Arizona, which is where I tend to see all of those. It could be a space out in Sacramento if you're in the Bay Area that's removed enough from the location, but yet still accessible if we need to reach those documents, and we've lost that capability on site. So definitely dispersion of vital records is key.
If we consider the document signed in DocuSign, should we also be keeping the DocuSign certification of completion?
Yes, I would recommend that. I would recommend keeping that. Granted, I believe there's a link, and I don't have one in front of me, unfortunately. I believe there's a link on that electronic document that allows you to go to the certification, but I might be wrong. If you have the certification, it doesn't hurt to keep it along with that document. Depends upon the nature of the document too. If it's something that you feel is vital, then sure. If it can potentially create liability to the organization, then yeah, I would keep it with the signed final version of the document.
What advice do you
It's subjective.
give? Oh, I'm sorry. What advice?
No, that's fine.
What advice do you give to clients who are already managing their documents using a cloud service for disaster recovery?
Well, that's great. You're a step ahead of most. Talk with the provider. It's a big subject within my industry now, just the nature of hosted systems and cloud systems, because we have so little control over retention components and how the information is stored, the safety and security of it. You need to talk with those providers and make sure that they have protocols in place for security, for backup, for all redundancy of some sort, because you're relying on them to manage your information, to store that information. Yes, you have access to it, but if something happens at their end, or if they go out of business for that matter, then make sure that you can get your information back at no cost. There are some systems out there that will remain nameless that charge you if you want your information back and you leave them as a service. And as far as I'm concerned, that's your information, it's not theirs. So work with them, make sure that they have a system in place that you can also reference then in internal policy, that security of your information is protected and maintained. I hope that answered your question properly.
Yeah, no, that's good. You it several times referred to giving information to the IT department versus the records coordinator, yes, versus another person. Is there a type of project management that you specifically recommend, or change management? Because this kind of reminds me of the days of IT people are from Mars, records managers are from Venus, and yeah, like, they both want the same ends, yeah, but don't necessarily get there the same way. Can you shed some light on what your recommendations for that would be?
And that's a great question, because yes, it used to be just that. The old times where, well, we're IT, we deal with all the information. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? Well, we're the ones that manage the information. We're the ones that tell you how long to keep the information. So now, more often than not, the IT groups are very receptive to us as records managers and to management systems, because it's not as simple as going down to the store and buying a hard drive and sticking it in and giving you an extra 5 terabytes of information. It's much, much, much more complex than that. There's redundancies. Again, there's RAID systems. There's systems that IT has to put into place in order to give you that extra space. So as far as they're concerned, they want to shrink it as much as possible. They don't like the shared drives. It's one reason that everyone's going towards SharePoint now and forcing you to look at those documents in the shared drives and purge stuff. As far as I'm concerned, everything on a shared drive should be transitory in nature, meaning the stuff that leads up to the final document, with the final document being in the repository. Now, working with IT on that, it is essential. And again, they're going to be receptive because they're going to want to streamline it as much as possible. Understanding that the repository will be the main focus of your job as the records manager of the organization. IT will then say, hey, well, all this other stuff that's sitting off to the side, what do we need to do with it? For other protocols, a lot of that actually resides on the integrator too, and working with your document management integrator and IT to make sure that IT is comfortable with the system that they're putting in place. Again, I hope I answered your question there. I kind of jumped around a bit.
No, that's it. I see the same thing happening. Back in those days, I think IT saw itself as sort of the masters of complexity and just, oh no, more to do, another department needing our help, blah, blah, blah. But as we've, moved forward with compliance and COVID and all these things, disaster recovery and all these things that have happened in the world today, because we have literally digitally transformed, is that records retention is equally as complex, right? So you've gone from one being more complicated and the other one being more simple to both being equally as complicated. So it's even more important that they work hand in glove together. So no, I think your thoughts are really valuable. So that looks like that's
absolutely. It comes down to that. I'm sorry. It comes down to that, to the storage. You know, they're anxious to get to reduce the administrative side of it all by improving how documents are stored, because we're going electronic, and they know it, and they see it, and they see the mess that is shared drives. So they want a tool.
Yes, get off SharePoint. I concur. Well, that looks like that's it for our questions. Thank you very much, Bruce and Jamie, and thank you to our audience. We appreciate you being here. And one more reminder, we have recorded this webinar and we'll post it on our website, cps247.com, by end of day tomorrow, although I'll probably put it up today. We'll send you an email alerting you that the webinar is up. Thanks again for making time to join us today, and hopefully we will see you on the next webinar.
And feel free to contact me if you want to. Like I said, I can talk about records ad nauseum, and I give a lot of presentations. I'm more than happy to talk about your systems. I'm not trying to promote myself here, but I can, give advice about records management and kind of a path to go forward. So thank you for your time.
Definitely. Thank you. Have a good day, guys.